Let's start. Here are the threats. Bishop takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes queen, check. Checks in puzzle position are. Bishop to e3, check. Bishop to b4, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes queen, check. Queen to e3, check. Queen to d3, check. Queen to c3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Bishop to e3, check. King to d1. Queen takes queen, check. King takes queen. Bishop takes bishop. Next puzzle position vulnerabilities are. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Knight takes rook. Checks in this position are. Queen to c6, check. Queen to e8, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Knight to b2, check. Solution to the puzzle is. Knight takes pawn, check. King to b5. Knight takes queen. Next, threats in this position are. King takes knight. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn. Checks in this position are. Queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is. King takes knight. Bishop to d6, check. Knight to f6. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are. Pawn takes rook. Checks in this position are. Queen to f5, check. Queen to h6, check. Queen to g4, check. Queen to h4, check. Queen to g3, check. Queen to h2, check. Queen to f3, check. Queen to f1, check. The best move in puzzle position is. Queen to h6, check. King to g4. Queen to g6, check. King to f3. Queen to f5, check. King takes pawn. Queen to e5, check. King to f3. Queen takes rook, check. Let's continue. Threats in puzzle position are. Queen takes rook. Knight takes pawn. Here are the checks. Queen to e2, check. Queen to e1, check. Solution to the puzzle is. Queen to e1, check. Rook takes queen. Rook takes rook, checkmate. Next puzzle, let us look at threats in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is. Queen to g3. Knight takes rook. Pawn takes knight. g5. Queen to h3. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are. Rook takes pawn. Checks in this position are. g4, check. Rook to c3, check. Rook to f2, check. The answer is. g4, check. Pawn takes pawn, check. Pawn takes pawn, checkmate. Next, threats in this position are. Pawn takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using. h6. King to e3. King to f6. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The answer is. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. One more. Here are the threats. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is. King to h8. Knight to e2. Pawn takes pawn. Let's continue. Here are the threats. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Here are the checks. Queen to c2, check. Queen to c1, check. The answer is. Rook to d6. Rook to c1. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. Rook takes queen, check. One more. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. Rook takes bishop. Rook takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. Here are the checks. Rook takes pawn, check. Knight to e2, check. Knight to d3, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight to d3, check. King to d2. Rook takes bishop. Rook takes rook. Knight takes rook. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are. There are no threats in this position. The checks are. Rook to d6, check. Rook to d6, check. The best move in puzzle position is rook to d6 check, king to e5, rook to d5 checkmate. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn, queen takes pawn check, bishop takes knight. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is queen to d6, rook to c8, bishop takes knight. One more. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Queen takes rook, queen takes rook check, queen takes pawn check, queen takes pawn, queen takes bishop, knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn, bishop takes pawn, bishop takes pawn. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen takes rook check, queen takes pawn check. Solution to the puzzle is knight to h5, queen to g6, knight to f6 check, king to g7, knight takes bishop, rook to e8, queen to d6. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn. Here are checks in puzzle position. c6 check. The answer is c6 check, bishop to d6, bishop takes bishop check, king takes bishop, pawn takes bishop. Let us go to the next puzzle. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes bishop. There are no checks in this position. The answer is pawn takes bishop. Let's continue. Let us look at threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes bishop, queen takes pawn check, queen takes rook check, queen takes bishop. Checks in puzzle position are queen takes pawn check, queen takes rook check. The puzzle is solved using queen takes rook check, king to h2, pawn takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Threats in this position are rook takes pawn, knight takes pawn, queen takes pawn check. The checks are queen takes pawn check, queen to c1 check, queen to b1 check, queen to a1 check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to b1 check, king to h2, knight to f1 check, queen takes knight, queen takes queen. One more. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are rook takes knight check, rook takes knight, rook takes pawn. The checks are rook takes knight check, rook to d8 check, rook to d2 check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Rook takes knight check, knight takes rook, rook takes rook. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes bishop. The checks are rook to f8 check, queen to f8 check, queen to f7 check, queen to f6 check, queen to h4 check, bishop to e1 check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to h4 check, king to g1, queen takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are rook takes knight check, rook takes rook, rook takes pawn. The checks are rook takes knight check, rook to e5 check. Answer to this puzzle is rook takes knight check, king takes rook, rook takes rook. Next, puzzle position vulnerabilities are knight takes pawn check. The checks are knight takes pawn check, knight to h7 check, queen to h6 check, queen to h8 check. Answer to this puzzle is knight to h7 check, rook takes knight, queen takes queen check. Another puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are there are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. King to d7, knight to c5 check, knight takes knight. Another one. The threats are bishop takes pawn, rook takes pawn, queen takes knight, queen takes pawn, knight takes pawn check, knight takes pawn. Here are the checks. Knight takes pawn check, knight to e2 check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen takes knight, bishop takes pawn check, king takes bishop. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.